Good evening. Tonight, we have a series of gentle, slow-burning crime stories to help you drift off. Each story unfolds softly, unraveling mystery without urgency. Let your thoughts wander as we begin. Story 1. The Vanishing at Violet Creek. In the quiet town of Elmridge, nestled beside a winding stream called Violet Creek, nothing unusual had happened in decades. But on a chilly morning in November 1983, schoolteacher Margaret Holloway left her cottage and began her daily walk to Elmridge Elementary. She never arrived. Her neighbor recalled seeing her bundled in a long gray coat, her bag clutched in gloved hands. Police found her satchel at the bend in the creek, resting upright as if placed there. The town mobilized immediately. Volunteers combed the path by foot and by boat. The fire chief recalled how still the morning was, as if the entire town was holding its breath. Helicopters flew overhead, and dogs sniffed the frosty ground. But there was no trace, no signs of struggle. Only her scarf was discovered later, hanging from a low branch, like it had been gently draped there, as if in farewell. A week later, Clive Richardson came forward. A reserved man in his 80s, Clive lived in a cottage near the creek trail. He claimed he had seen a woman near the bend. Not Margaret, but someone with the same gait, wearing clothes reminiscent of the 19th century. He described her as walking straight into the morning mist, without hesitation. She looked like she knew where she was going, he told police. But there's nothing down there but fog and trees. Initially dismissed, his claim grew more curious when a visiting hiker from out of town reported an encounter just days after Margaret disappeared. A woman had stopped him on the trail, asking for directions to the chapel by the brook. But there hadn't been a chapel in Elmridge since it burned down in 1891. As the case faded from headlines, the community tried to return to normal. But strange rumors grew. In spring, a group of children exploring behind the old mill house stumbled upon a rusted metal hatch. Below it was a crawl space lined with aged timber, dust-choked shelves, and a crude cot. A faint smell of earth and mildew clung to the walls. Names were scratched into the stone, some barely legible, but one stood out. Monsieur Holloway. Forensics concluded it was recent. On the floor lay a leather-bound journal. Its pages were mostly blank, save for a few entries written in a looping, old-fashioned script. The final entry read, "The creek widens with time." I stepped through. After the journal surfaced, whispers of the supernatural returned. Local dogs began refusing to walk the path. Elderly residents spoke of similar vanishings in the early 1900s, dismissed then as folklore. One resident, a retired librarian, produced an archived police report from 1926 about a woman named Edith who vanished near the same bend. Her last known words, "The fog is singing again." Margaret's sister, who stayed in town to continue searching, swore she heard her voice one night. Not shouting, not crying, just softly reciting poetry. Her favorite line repeated, "And I shall go into the mist where no clocks ring." Exactly 1 year later, a fisherman pulled something strange from the creek, a dry, sealed satchel containing a note. Written in Margaret's distinctive handwriting, it read, "Time folds here." I walked too far, but I saw beauty. It was signed with her name and dated the day she vanished. Elmridge quietly closed the Violet Creek Trail after dusk. Signs read, "Unstable ground," but locals know better. On foggy nights, they say the trail bends more sharply than usual. And if you listen closely, the wind carries footsteps, steady, calm, and the gentle rustle of a scarf brushing past. Story 2. The Paper Doll Killer. In the fall of 1974, a chilling series of crimes rattled Bellwood, a small Pennsylvania town known for its picket fences and quiet routines. It started with a single paper doll, crude, yellowing, and folded from what looked like pages of an old book. It was left on the doorstep of the Walker family, propped against the front door like a child's forgotten toy. 3 days later, their daughter Katie was gone. Soon, more dolls appeared. One on the porch swing of a different family, one inside a mailbox, one nailed to a tree near the elementary school. Each doll was slightly different, but shared the same eerie traits: blank face, uneven limbs, and a small paper hat numbered sequentially. Panic gripped Bellwood. Parents kept children home. Schools canceled recess. Still, the disappearances continued. Detective Ellen Rayner, new to the department, noticed something everyone else had missed. All the missing children were the youngest in their families. All had vanished on Thursday nights, and each had received, or been near, a paper doll within 48 hours. Surveillance was attempted, but the dolls kept coming. One even appeared inside the police station, on Rayner's own desk, with the number 9 written in blue ink on its back. That same week, a child named Teddy vanished and reappeared the next morning, unharmed but changed. He wouldn't speak except to say, "She folded me flat so I could fit inside." He held tightly to a paper doll. Forensics revealed it was made from an out-of-print children's book. The trail led Rayner to Lucinda Graves, an eccentric recluse who had once written peculiar children's stories with twisted endings. She had disappeared from public life in the early 60s. Her mansion, long abandoned, was found to be filled with paper creations, animals, dolls, even full paper towns. On the attic door, someone had written, "Her hands are never still." Inside the attic was a small rocking chair facing a mirror. Dolls were arranged in rows, each marked with initials. Some matched the missing children. In a cabinet, police found a sealed letter addressed to the next folder. It read, "They must be thin enough to slip between." Lucinda's grave was exhumed at Rayner's request. It contained only paper, layers upon layers of pressed pages folded into humanoid shapes. No bones, no remains. But when examined closely, the pages included fragments of Lucinda's stories, including one about a woman who could crease the veil between worlds. Dolls began appearing again, this time in nearby towns, in schools, in library books. Each bore a faint smile drawn in pencil, identical in every case. Children started reporting dreams of being folded, flattened, or slipping through walls. Today, Bellwood remembers the paper doll killer as a ghost story. But new cases trickle in. The dolls now use modern magazines or receipts. The folds are identical, a technique dubbed the Graves fold. No known artist or origami master can replicate it. Detective Rayner, now long retired, keeps a sealed box in her attic marked Doll Number 32. She refuses to say what's inside, but she once told a reporter, "They don't fold themselves. Someone, or something, still does the creasing." Story 3. The Locked Room on Bridge Street. Bridge Street was a sleepy stretch in the heart of Morrow's End, a town so small it barely made maps. At the corner of Bridge and Elm stood a weathered boarding house run by the Winfield sisters, Mabel and Joyce, both in their 70s. The place was known for quiet lodgers, chipped teacups, and its strict curfew. But one October morning in 1988, the sisters knocked on Room 3's door for breakfast. No answer. The door was locked from the inside. They fetched the constable, who pried it open. Inside lay John Halpern, a traveling salesman. He was seated at the desk, slumped forward. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. Window latched. The only thing out of place? A single playing card, the Jack of Spades, left on the windowsill. John had checked in only 2 nights before. Paid in cash, no ID, just a name written in slanted cursive in the ledger. Among John's belongings was a small leather journal. Most pages were blank, but one had a note tucked between, a cipher of some kind. It used playing card suits as symbols. Investigators handed it over to the town librarian, Irene Maddox, who had a knack for puzzles. Irene worked late into the night. Finally, she cracked the first sentence. Bridge not stone, hollow. Beneath beats breath. More lines followed, including Jack watches east and he folded time twice. Suddenly, the town was talking about a man seen near the bridge days before. He wore a long brown coat and carried a silver cane. No one knew his name. The sisters revealed an old rumor that the boarding house once served as a speakeasy during Prohibition. A hidden basement had long been sealed off. A carpenter helped them open it. Inside, they found crates of dusty bottles, a crumbling poker table, and, most puzzling, a mural painted on the stone wall. A map of the town, but with strange additions: tunnels, paths, and a red X marked beneath Bridge Street. At the center of the mural was the Jack of Spades. That night, one of the lodgers heard shuffling in the basement, followed by the creaking of the trap door swinging shut. The next morning, he was gone, his bed untouched. A Queen of Hearts card was left behind. Police searched every inch of the house. In room 4, under the floorboards, they found a hidden passage. It led to a narrow hallway behind the walls. The hall twisted sharply and ended at a second locked door. No keyhole, only a carved message. Fold yourself. Inside were dozens of photographs. People who had stayed there over the decades. Some were marked with suits and numbers. Cross-referencing them showed many had no death records, just disappearances. The hallway wall had playing card symbols scrawled in charcoal. Each one was marked with a date. One was tomorrow's. Years passed. The Winfield sisters died. The boarding house was sold. Renovations began, but stalled. Tools went missing. Rooms changed dimensions. Guests reported waking in unfamiliar parts of the building. A new guest, a writer researching the original mystery, claimed to see a man in a brown coat standing at the top of the stairs. The man tipped his silver cane and walked into room 3. The door had been nailed shut for a decade. Locals say the house is alive, folding itself like paper, rearranging. The Jack still watches east, and sometimes, if you're alone in room 3, you'll find a card left on your pillow, always face down. Story 4. The Bell Tower Murmurs. At the center of Galesworth stood St. Arwin's Chapel, its bell tower stretching high above the village. For nearly a century, old bellkeeper Francis Greeley climbed its narrow stairs every Sunday to ring the massive bronze bell. Until one morning, in 1992, when he didn't. His room was empty, the stairs were dusty, yet the bell rang. Not at noon, but at 3:03 a.m., 3 times. Locals awoke in confusion. A few claimed they heard whispers carried on the sound. An audiophile and amateur radio operator named Darcy Clemens recorded the bell chimes by chance. When played at low speed, the background noise wasn't wind. It was a voice, repeated in an old dialect. The 4th rung marks passage. Inside the bell tower, investigators found a torn page from a priest's diary wedged in the rafters. It read, "He walks between the chimes." Darcy continued monitoring the frequency. Each chime revealed fragments, names, prayers, and what sounded like coordinates. But no two chimes were the same. Renovators found something behind the fourth rung of the staircase, a small hollow containing several rolled-up scrolls and a ring of keys. The scrolls contained psalms, but with strange annotations. Arrows, circles, the phrase, "Step out on the fourth." Late one night, a janitor reportedly did. On the fourth chime, he opened the tower door, stepped out onto the ledge, and vanished. His flashlight was later found on the lawn below, intact. Security footage flickered at that moment, showing a faint silhouette against the bell. Church records showed a gap. Entire families listed as members had simply stopped appearing in attendance logs, with no explanation. Inquiries showed those families had vanished, houses empty. Each had lived within earshot of the bell. When audio engineers mapped sound patterns from the tower, they found that specific frequencies formed a geometric spiral, pointing east, toward an old, disused abbey. An underground passage was later discovered beneath the abbey ruins. Its walls bore etchings of bells, each with a different number of chimes. To this day, the bell occasionally rings at 3:03 a.m., always 3 times. The church is locked at night, and the bell has no automatic ringer. Residents say the tone has changed, deeper, more metallic, and some hear voices layered beneath. Not malevolent, just patient. And when the fog rolls in from the east, it's said you can see a figure on the bell tower ledge, waiting for the fourth chime. Story 5. The Lighthouse Ledger. Mariner's Point lighthouse had stood over the cliffs of Alder Bay since 1871. Once critical to passing ships, by the 1980s it was automated and forgotten. But in 1984, its lightkeeper, Gerald Vance, insisted on returning, claiming, in his words, "Some things still need watching." Vance kept detailed logbooks, each filled with precise entries. But his final volume, discovered after his disappearance, was different. Pages were missing. The remaining entries were erratic, some written backward, others in strange symbols. The last full line simply read, "She walks the tide in mirror light." Local fishermen reported strange behavior from the lighthouse before Vance disappeared. Its beam would stutter at exactly 2:07 a.m., a time none of them ever forgot. Boats claimed to hear the horn blow without cause, even when fog was clear. A trawler reported seeing 2 beams crisscross, as if another lighthouse stood just beyond the mist. When the Coast Guard investigated, the light tower was empty, meals untouched, logbook left open to a drawing of a shoreline with no coordinates. In the archives of the Alder Bay Museum, a woman researching shipwrecks came across a second ledger, identical to Vance's. Same dates, same handwriting. But the events it described were different. In that version, Vance died in 1973. His funeral, attended by townsfolk, even included a eulogy. Yet no such funeral ever took place. Locals were stunned. No one remembered burying him. Historians began to wonder, was there another Vance? Or had history folded itself around him? Chapter 4. Echoes Beneath the Tide. Divers exploring near the lighthouse's base found an underwater crevice that pulsed with warm currents, uncharacteristic for the season. Inside, they discovered items belonging to previous lightkeepers, including a brass pocket watch belonging to one who vanished in 1902. Recordings placed underwater picked up an odd sound. like a woman singing just beneath the threshold of hearing. The song repeated only once per night, just before 2:07 a.m. Today, the lighthouse is abandoned, yet its light still occasionally flashes. The foghorn calls without wind. Visitors have claimed to see a second light flicker offshore, one that doesn't match any known coordinates. And at low tide, some say a trail of footprints appears on the rocks, walking inland, though no one is there to make them. The final page of the logbook, once blank, was found recently inked with new words. The light isn't meant to warn. It's meant to beckon. Story 6. The Harvest Hollow Disappearances. Every October, the town of Belridge hosted the Harvest Hollow Festival. Corn mazes, cider stalls, and, most famously, the haunted hayride through Fogwood Glen. But in 1991, the last cart of the night never returned. 6 passengers, a driver, and a lantern. Gone. Tracks led into the forest and stopped. Not a single voice was heard. No hoofbeats, no struggle. The search lasted weeks. All they found was the driver's scarf tied neatly to a branch and the scent of burnt pine. When authorities finally found the cart, a full month later, it was perfectly parked in the middle of the cornfield. Clean, no damage, as if it had never left. Inside lay 7 carved pumpkins, each one with a distinct face. No candle, but each still warm. Beneath them were notes written on corn husks. One simply read, "We went where the scarecrows point." Local teens who had explored the corn maze earlier recalled a strange new path they didn't remember being built, one that twisted behind the pumpkin barn and led to an old root cellar. That cellar, once opened, revealed a spiral tunnel dug into the earth. The walls were lined with hay bundles. At the center, a wooden chair, a lantern still burning, and another pumpkin, smiling wide. Etched into the wall. Harvest comes from the hollow. In the years that followed, children playing in the field would sometimes report hearing laughter coming from the stalks, or soft singing. Adults dismissed it until recordings picked up voices saying names of the vanished. Farmhands said the soil in that patch stayed warm all winter. No snow would land. Animals wouldn't graze. In 2021, on the festival's closing night, a hay cart was found parked exactly where the last one had vanished 30 years earlier. Inside were 6 seats, empty, but freshly dusted, and a lantern, burning low. And beside the cart, 7 pumpkins, each carved with the face of someone lost in 1991, all smiling, all fresh. On the back of the cart, scratched in wood, "We ride again next harvest." Story 7. The Woman Beneath the Floorboards. St. Clarity's School for Girls sat nestled in the dense countryside of northern Vermont, a brick and oak structure once known for its discipline and discretion. In 1977, the headmistress began receiving quiet complaints from students in dormitory East Wing. They heard whispers from the floor at night, not muffled voices, actual words. The whispers knew their names. Girls claimed the floorboards moved, ever so slightly, under their beds. A few reported cold air rising between the planks. One wrote in her diary, "She's listening. I think she's under me." Another said her pillow was warm every morning, as if someone had laid there beside her. Rumors spread quickly. Girls claimed they saw fingers slip between cracks, or heard the dragging of something soft, like cloth or hair, sliding just below them. Maintenance found an old trapdoor beneath a corner desk in room 12B, nailed shut and painted over. When pried open, it revealed a forgotten crawl space, 6 feet deep and only accessible by crawling. It had no connecting tunnels, no light. Inside, they found a tattered shawl, a rusted comb, and a leather-bound journal signed by a former student. Eleanor Frost, class of 1911. She had vanished her final year, recorded as a runaway. But the journal's final entry was dated 4 years after she disappeared. Its ink was still crisp. It described watching the world from the floorboards above, longing to be remembered. More unsettling was the discovery of a string of dried flowers braided into a long cord, wrapped around the comb. Wild violets, still faintly fragrant despite the dust. Following the discovery, strange reports increased. Girls in the East Wing claimed they heard tapping beneath their beds. 3 quick knocks, always at 2:13 a.m. Some heard humming after, or a soft sigh that seemed relieved. One student, Margaret Lang, bravely tapped back. She wrote that she heard a soft knock in response, and a voice whispering, "Don't forget me." Margaret vanished the following week. Her belongings were still in her trunk. Her bed was made. A single comb, identical to Eleanor's, was left on her pillow. Her diary ended with the line, "She isn't angry, just lonely." The school began quietly auditing old records. They found a troubling pattern. Every 13 years, a girl went missing from the same dorm wing. Always a quiet one. Always just before spring. None had ever been found. An old nun who had taught for over 40 years finally spoke to authorities. She claimed Eleanor had been a talented pianist, scolded harshly for playing late at night. One evening, she'd played for hours. By morning, she was gone, and the room had grown ice cold. Years later, the music teacher said she'd sometimes return to the music room and find the old piano's keys depressed, held down by invisible fingers. The school has since shuttered, but the building remains. Occasionally, maintenance crews working late report faint piano music echoing through the East Wing, though no piano has stood there for decades. Some say that if you sit still long enough in room 12B, you'll feel warmth rise from beneath the floor. And sometimes, a single note sounds, then another, until the full lullaby plays. The same one Eleanor once composed, and never finished. And if you're still awake when it ends, you may hear a final whisper. Thank you. Story 8. The Grey Diner Incident. Outside Dalton's Cross, nestled off Highway 19, stood a silver-sided truck-stop diner known as the Grey. It had never been photographed. It didn't show up on GPS, but truckers swore by its coffee. In 1993, a waitress named Lily was reported missing after her shift. She had clocked out, left a tip for the cook, and vanished. Her coat still hung on the wall peg. Her notebook still lay open on the counter. The page was blank, except for one doodle, a spiral, drawn over and over. Local police found no sign of struggle. The last receipt in the till was stamped at 3:11 a.m. No items purchased. Just a single handwritten note. Just passing through. Security footage showed Lily speaking to someone, but the booth was empty. Her conversation went on for 3 minutes. Then she stood, walked to the kitchen, and never returned. More chilling was the timestamp. The footage was labeled April 12th, the exact same date that another waitress disappeared in 1967. Same shift, same hour. The Grey had always operated 24/7, but staff reported odd customers after midnight. Silent types, ones who never ordered. Some wore suits decades out of date. One cook described a regular with fogged glasses and a strange watch that ticked backwards. Sometimes they paid in coins no one could identify. Others simply left notes, folded perfectly, in place of a tip, notes written in a language no one could translate. One server claimed she looked up at the mirror above the booths and saw no reflection, not of herself, not of the diner. In the months after Lily's disappearance, staff began reporting a strange loop. A customer would enter, order a coffee, ask for the usual, and then, like clockwork, the jukebox would play an unfamiliar song, and the power would flicker. Every time. Then, one night, the power went out entirely. When it came back, a second waitress uniform was hanging beside Lily's coat. Identical, but untouched by time. The back room smelled faintly of lilac and ozone. On the floor was a key ring no one had ever seen, shaped like a crescent moon. Today, the gray still operates. No one remembers who owns it. The sign flickers. The jukebox works, but only after 3 a.m. And every night, booth 6 remains empty. Staff say that if you pour coffee there, just once, and leave a receipt with no total, you'll hear a soft "thank you" before the bell chimes. Sometimes, a shadow flickers in the reflection of the pie case. A tall figure, still and waiting. Story 9. The Photographer's Basement. In the small town of Windmere, tucked beside a withered stretch of forest, lived a reclusive photographer named Leon Albright. He ran a studio out of his home and was known for his eerie, sepia-toned portraits. Most said they looked too real, as if his subjects were still breathing. In 1986, he vanished. All that was found was his final roll of undeveloped film, placed neatly beside a candle in the basement darkroom. When developed, the photos revealed people no one recognized, standing in rooms that didn't exist. Each person stared at the camera. But one thing stood out. They were all posed in front of an empty chair. Leon's studio contained a guest ledger going back nearly 20 years. Names, addresses, and small notes written by visitors. But many names, when cross-referenced with census data, didn't exist. The ink on older entries looked unusually fresh, as if rewritten. Oddest of all, the last page of the book had Leon's handwriting. A single line repeated, "She won't let them leave." That same phrase was found carved beneath the developing sink in the dark room, carved deep into the wood, backwards. Taped to the underside of the sink was a torn envelope, sealed with red wax and never opened. It contained a single photograph of Leon, sitting in the infamous chair. Beneath a tarp in the basement was a mirror, tall, cracked, and framed in red pine. Behind it, a hinged section of the wall. It led to a narrow passage lit only by reflective light. The walls were paneled with old negatives strung like wallpaper. Inside were shelves of unframed portraits. Every face was unfamiliar. But one investigator swore one image blinked when touched. Another photo shifted, ever so slightly, as though the subject had adjusted posture. Scrawled on the inside wall, "Do not show her reflection." A neighbor recalled seeing a pale woman in a gray shawl walk through Leon's yard just days before he vanished. She wore a blindfold and carried a small case. That case, found in the basement, held an antique lens wrapped in lace, etched with the words, "Observe in silence." Some theorized Leon had photographed something he shouldn't have, that the lens itself had recorded more than light, that it captured time, or memory, or something in between. Rumors spread that the lens, when mounted to any camera, would automatically focus on the chair. To this day, the house remains empty, but cameras left on the property always capture a final frame, one no one remembers taking. It always includes the chair, and someone sitting in it, even if no one was there. Investigators attempted to remove the mirror, but at midnight, it returned to the wall, reattached, polished. And here's the twist. In 2023, a local art gallery held a retrospective of Leon Albright's work. One photograph stunned viewers. It showed a current-day tourist, known to be alive and well, seated in the chair, eyes wide. She swore she had never posed, never visited Windermere. The chair, it seems, still waits. Story 10. The Midnight Conductor. The old tracks outside of Alderton haven't carried trains in decades. Overgrown and rusted, they wind past empty fields and forgotten stations. But some nights, just after midnight, the whistle sounds. Not sharp, not modern. A low, ancient call that seems to come from everywhere. In 2003, a group of teens camping nearby claimed they saw a full passenger train drift past. Lights on, curtains pulled back, every seat filled with still, pale figures. A watchmaker in town, Henry Bell, found a silver pocket watch hanging from his shop door the next morning. It was engraved with the words, "One last departure." Inside, it ticked backwards. That same morning, Henry disappeared. His stool still warm, his tea still steaming. The only clue, a single train ticket, dated 1907, stamped reissue. Research into Alderton's train history revealed a curious manifest. In 1907, a train carrying 30 passengers vanished en route to Boston. Weather was clear. No wreckage was ever found. But at the Alderton Library, tucked inside a box of old schedules, was a faded ticket, punched and dated 1907. Recently used. Handwritten in the margin were the words, "See you again soon." A podcaster recorded ambient sound at the old station. On playback, a voice could be heard over the whistle. Calm, commanding, "All aboard. Tickets, please." When played in reverse, the voice said, "We never stopped." Static followed, then laughter. Not unkind, but knowing. The town clock tower chimes every hour, but on some nights it chimes 13 times, always at 12:13 a.m. Those who hear it say they dream of train stations they've never seen, cold, flickering lights, and a conductor who walks through the mist offering a hand. Some claim they've taken his hand and awoken days later, miles from where they slept. And here's the twist. In 2024, an archived photo surfaced. It showed a train departing Alderton Station in 1907. But among the passengers, perfectly clear, was Henry Bell, the watchmaker. Younger, smiling, holding a pocket watch. The past never left. It just waited for its return line. And by now, dear listener, you're likely fast asleep, safe, still, and gently adrift. Let these mysteries carry you deeper into the quiet. We'll be here again, when the fog returns. Good night.